T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
You are now tapped into the coolest reptile podcast in the world. Welcome to Trap Talk Reptile Podcast, episode 348. I'm your boy, MJ. What is good, everybody? If this is your first time tapping into your boy, MJ, a favor, hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. That way, on top of every single piece of content I drop on this channel, if you're into keeping reptiles, admiring, breeding, fuck, dude, all the above, this is the right podcast to be tapping into, okay? I gotta say shout out to all my viewers, my reoccurring viewers, all my Patreon members. I love my Patreon members. If you're looking for exclusive content, go down to the very first link below, okay? If you want more behind the scenes of what I have going on, if you just want to tap in with a lot of passionate, long-term reptile keepers that you can maybe just build friendships with and many other awesome things, I'm telling you right now, man, don't sleep on the Trap Talk Patreon family. Growing by the day, Patreon members, I love you guys so much. But yes, as soon as you join the Patreon family, you get a link to the Discord, and the Discord taps you in with over 165 trappers. Real deal, Holyfield. You know what I'm saying? Also, give me a follow on Instagram, Trap Talk God 619. If you want to see what I have going on with my own animals and stuff like that, best way to do that. Follow me on IG, and then also follow the podcast's Instagram page as well, the Trap Talk Reptile Podcast on IG. Facebook, where you at? If you're on Facebook, show me some love, okay? Follow me. Hit that like button on that Facebook page. I'm trying to get that blown up as well, and I need your help with that, so thank you so much. And then, yeah, man, also, guys, don't sleep on my other channel. I know I've been sleeping on you guys, but nah, I'm back. I got another episode dropping tomorrow on my other channel, the Trap Vlogs on YouTube. Go subscribe. Another way to see how my year is going, okay? Because I'm very transparent. You know, you guys hear me talk a lot of what happens with my own projects, but you can actually see it for yourself on this YouTube channel, the Trap Vlogs, okay? So shout out to anyone who's subscribed to that channel. Much love and respect. I do want to say that tonight's episode is brought to you by Clutch. If you want to get organized, you want to take it to that professional level of ball python keeping for now. Hopefully chondros and other amazing sick species could be added to Clutch once the ball pythons get perfected, because they're perfecting this, man. They are not sleeping on you guys. Clutch is it, and it is cracking. So much more to come from this company. I do want to say shout out to Justin Kabelka, the entire Clutch team, Sebastian, his partner, man. I'm telling you right now, Clutch is awesome. Let me know how you're liking Clutch. If you're out there using Clutch and it's been awesome for you, drop a comment, okay, in the comment section. Not the live chats, goddammit. Drop a comment in the comment section, please. I appreciate it. By the way, you got eggs? What do you do with those eggs? Put them inside of a sim box. That's right. Less steps, less stress. If it's a sim, it's a win. I don't even want to talk about this. God damn it. I'm going to jinx myself. It's okay. I love you guys. My 4 Persinas eggs from Brittany's second clutch of the year are doing good. My incubator, though, definitely just going to be a ball python SD retic incubator. I'm only going to be doing those for the big snakes as recommended on my podcast with Patrick Holmes and Mark Hager. Shout out to the players. But yes, at least I have a huge walk-in incubator for all my ball python projects, which, I mean, let's be honest, those are the ones that take the most space. And yeah, anyways, I don't mean to go down on a tangent, but I got to tell you, man, no matter what eggs I do get in this room, in the trap, they go inside of a sim box. Been using sims for going on 4 years now. I got plenty of sims. I'm supposed to be doing a sim container giveaway. I'm going to be doing one at the end of this month. Okay, so be ready for that, guys. I would like to prove to you guys that your eggs should be hatching out of a sim box. Also, drop a comment. Let me know if you use sims. Give a little salute to sims. John and Alex, appreciate you guys so much. Shout out to the early birds. I want to get to the early birds, but I do want to touch on something real quick because obviously it ain't no secret. You know what I mean? You feel me? Another massacre, I guess you could say. But this massacre wasn't designed by a government agency. This is a massacre from one man. One of many. I can understand that this real piece of work, I'm trying to be as pleasant as I can right now, but this real piece of work who's being accused, and if anyone out there is trying to say that whatever is being displayed on certain YouTube channels and certain Facebook groups, this is all recent documentation. This is not something from years ago, okay? But here's the thing, it's already happened. Like I'm talking, obviously I talk to a lot of people about situations like this, and I also want to talk to people before I just go live and tell how I feel about it, because obviously this guy who's, this guy Samson, right? Ain't no secret. We all know who the fuck we're talking about. But this guy has been around for a while, been accused of the worst. First and foremost, I love my reptiles guys. Like what he's doing or what he has done by the pictures proven by certain people really breaks my heart. But I love dogs a lot more than reptiles. I don't want to say a lot more, but goddamn, it's like dogs and reptiles, right? I won't lie, dogs supreme in my world. I just love dogs, even though I don't breed them. I don't want to, but I love dogs. I'm obsessed. You can't beat a dog. Perfect thing. A dog's goal in life is to make a human happy. You could hit it, you could neglect it, you could starve it, and it just wants to make you happy. How fucking so anyways, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I'm just saying, like, this man's been accused of killing dogs. And here he is brought back in, being let back in shows, so it's like, this is obviously hasn't stopped. I'm not, a lot of you guys are excited saying that, oh man, he's canceled this time. Well, that's if he wants to be, right? He has to shut himself down, I hope, but either way, I'm looking at this as like, if this is like, because understand the ones who are getting the most hyped up are the ones who are fresh into this industry, like me. That's why I get so hyped up. Forrest used to make fun of me, rest in peace, Forrest Fanning. But my old best friend, Forrest Fanning, used to make fun of me. He was like, bro, you're so like me 10 years ago. Like, I see you get so angry. And honestly, I've carried that, mind you. It hasn't gone away. Obviously, I'm kind of doing better controlling it. But, dude, this still fucks with me, But you got a lot of OGs who've been in this game that just go, oh, yep, that ain't nothing new. And they can just kind of shrug their shoulders. Not that they don't want nothing to happen. Trust me, I've had people come to me say, MJ, can you talk about this? Can you shit on this guy? Can you fucking destroy him? Blah, blah, blah. And they're naming all these other big breeders, which I get it. It's many of the big people. It's many of the bigger people. The higher ones making the most money are the biggest shitheads. It sucks. It's very sad. Not all of them. I'm not going to say all of them, but man, it is the majority of that. So you got to look at it like this. First and foremost, I follow, even though I don't like to, honestly, I don't follow, but I did join the Samson Files group just to kind of stay on top of what's going to happen, right? Or if there's anything that's going to come out. Is this guy going to publicly say, yes, I finally admit to all this, or is he going to disappear and move to another state, lay low, and come back, right? Just curious what the outcome is. But, yeah, I don't know. I just, I don't want any of this shit to backfire, right? Like, this could easily be a Netflix documentary. Like, if the right person catches wind of this and they know that person and know that person who could put something together and say, let's video this shit. It's that easy, right? So that's what scares me. That's why I'm like, fuck. Because trust me, I'm like you guys. I'm pissed. I'm like, And what really pisses me off is that there's people out there still saying like, oh man, well, he is my friend. What the fuck? That's his true colors. That's true colors. And there is a lot of other people who really back up piece of shit people, either because of money wise, or they just don't have no morals, or they have nothing like, they don't really stand for anything. I don't know, man. What a fucked up, I will say, for the entire reticulated Python community, which again, this isn't uncommon, I guess. I have people like to say, oh, here we go, another shitstorm for the retic community, right? But it's sad. I think it's really fucked up. Reticulated pythons are such a beautiful, majestic, prehistoric snake that we get in this industry. Look how it's being represented. Like, look at it. I would say, more than half those photos being put down in that Slither Files is reticulated pythons. And I hate seeing them like that. Oh my God. And listen, I'm somebody like, I have some people who just try to, and I get it, everyone's busy, but some people are like, oh yeah, that shit just got there. Or they'll just try to say something to make themselves look like they're cleaner than they are. And then I'll investigate. Like, I'll give you an idea. Like, I went to someone's collection, and they're trying like, oh yeah, that just shit. And I'm like, really? That shit's been there for a long time. I don't care, but don't try to tell me that shit just happened, because it didn't, right? So I get it. But when I look at these photos that this guy Samson that came from this guy Samson's facility, it is just beyond, like, I'm talking about, like, was this collection abandoned? Did he go away for a little bit? Did he go to the Bahamas? Did he fucking go on vacation and told nobody to go over? Like, the soil is like rock hard, compact, hard, and the animal looks like it's been there for I don't know how long. This shit gives me legit PTSD. I'm glad I'm really calm about it, because normally when I get like when this type of stuff happens to me, I get upset. Like, I like to react angrily. I want to obviously do harm to people like this. I don't look at anyone less than someone who's like a pedophile or something like this. That's the same category that I look at somebody like this, really, because they don't deserve to have animals. They don't deserve to be a part of such an epic industry. Reptile industry is one of the best industries. You can't, even though we have to deal with what we deal with, nothing's cooler than fucking keeping reptiles. So I will say this, okay? I kind of want to just break away from this now, because it is time to get down to the meat and potatoes. I want to talk to my boy Rich Crowley. I also want to get to the early birds guys, but this is kind of why I went 5 minutes early, just so I could get this off my chest, because I want to make this, like, I want to just say what I have to say about this and then get back to trapping, right? You guys have the ability to vote many different ways for somebody. Obviously, the dollar is the biggest way. You want to keep somebody relevant, you spend money with them, okay? Anybody who has done business with Samson, anyone who has spent money with Samson, anybody who has owed money or whatever business ties you have with this guy, you need to do some deep reflecting on yourself. I don't care how big you are. I'm kind of talking to a certain individual too out there. You better fucking reach deep down into your soul and do what's right. Because there are a group of motherfuckers who aren't going to let this go. There's a lot more information that's supposed to come. So if you think this is it, no, it's not. It's crazy. Anyways, I guess that's my piece on it. You're a piece of shit if you support piece of shit. That's what I'm going to say. I don't give a fuck. I don't care how long you know somebody. If that person is doing someone else a disfavor by sending them a fake United States captive border bred or a sick animal or something where it hurts their pocket, but mainly hurts their feelings because they love the animal. If an animal dies on me, I think about the animal first, and then, yeah, okay, if it's an expensive animal, I do think of the money. I try that. Ball pythons is different, obviously, but, like, I can't put a price on anything behind me. Like, nothing behind me has a price, technically. So if it dies, my heart hurts. There's people out there who've been accused year after year after year after year after year after year of just sending pork, taking care of animals, and just put it in their hands and say, well, I'll replace it with another one that just dies. It's the same Petco fucking. How different is that than a Petco or a PetSmart? Anyways, early birds, what's good? Let's get cracking. That's all I got to say on that, man. Listen, you are a piece of shit if you fucking pay or, that's all I got to say. Think deep. Go deep. Go deep. Go deep. Think about if you really care about the animals. That's all I got to say. Early birds. Early birds is cracking right now. I'm not going to lie, man. Early birds, I'm glad I got that over with. All right. RO 5.0, Trap Talk Patreon member. What's good? Thanks for tapping in. Cohen's Constrictors in the building. What is good? Thanks for tapping in. Miller's Menagerie. What is good? Thanks for tapping in. Oh, wow. David Levison. Thanks for tapping in. I thought you were Rich Crowley, but it's you, Dave. Where'd Rich go? Rich, come all the way in, Rich, because I don't see you, buddy. Just so you know, if you're hearing me, Rich, you're not in here. Dave, what's up?
Hanging out.
Cheers, buddy. How are you?
Well enough, bud. Another 12-hour day in the building so I can be here with you.
Listen, since we're waiting for Rich, I do got to say, Dave, how do we move as a community around something like the Samson files right now, in your opinion? Clean. Let's just want to hear from you. What's the best thing possible about this?
I mean, if seeing things like that don't make you want to be better at what you do, you'll never be better at this. I'll be honest, my attention to detail this week, even on sweeping floors and whatever else, honestly, seeing that just makes me want to be better at what we do here.
Well said. Listen, early birds, I'm not going to lie. I love you guys. You're here, but so is our guy of the night, and that's Rich Crowley, episode 348. coming at you right now. Dave's here. He looks hot, feature-wise. And we're getting into this. Let's go. You ready for do more in the future? Trap Talk podcasts?
Yes.
Man.
Only Trap Talk. Exclusive.
Yes,
Exclusive. Oh.
So stop calling us.
Rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up with the crop, gotta love it or not. I'm hot from the hop to the rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up with the rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up with the rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up with the rub the spot, get the club to pop. When I come up with everybody, we do it. Everybody, we do it. Do it. Do it.
Coolest reptile podcast in the world, episode 348. Rich Crowley, ladies and gentlemen. What's up, Rich?
What's up, guys? How's everybody?
Doing well, buddy. How are you?
I don't know, but technology was messing with me. I was all set there waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting.
Oh, Dave knows all about technology, huh, Dave?
I don't know shit about technology.
Hey, Dave, Rich, Dave, just so I could just go and introduce you two real quick.
Good to meet you, bud.
Rich,
Nice to meet you.
how long you been in the industry, Rich? Because your name has been dropped for a long time since I've been doing this podcast. So let's get right to that. How long you been in the industry for?
I could say a solid 25 years. I've been sort of back involved with reptiles my whole life, but I mean, in earnest with exotics for 30. So, you know, I was doing rescue activities first and foremost back in 94 and just evolved into where we're at today. I mean, it's, you know, sometimes you run with something and you find your passion and you stick with the passion. So,
Dave, do you know what kind of racks those are behind Rich? Because those look like those are like some OG ones. Am I tripping? Or I mean, what kind of
Those all look like ARS racks to me.
yeah, baby.
how and those, like you were saying before we went live, those are the ones that you got newer ones. So those
I got
are
a whole
those aren't the
other
newer ones.
set. Yeah, so I got 3 9706s for those that don't know. They're I got them stacked 6 high, but they're about 4 foot by 2.5 foot, and then I got the 8514s that you see behind me. But I have a whole nother group of them that, unfortunately, the Wildlife Discovery Center, which is a zoological institution in Lake Forest, Illinois, closed down after a run of about 30 plus years.
Wow.
I was able to get the extra cages. So, yeah.
So, okay, so 25 years ago, you didn't have no racks like that, obviously, right? Or what did you have in your room 25 years ago? That I'm curious.
Oh man. So, well, yeah, I started out with the old school mindset of whatever worked, right? Glass aquariums, and, you know, struggled with the stupidity of trying to figure out how to keep the animals contained and how to keep them to thrive and succeed in that. But it was quickly after that, you know, I don't know, for those that don't know, I've been an active member of the Chicago Herbological Society for a really long time. I've been a board member for most of the time I've been there. I got connected with some peeps that showed me the right way. You know, they showed me what it took to actually maintain the animal's temperature, humidity, the whole shot, and get around to a little bit of DIY, get away from the glass aquariums until there was Neodesha cages were out at that time, which the front slanted glass were great, very popular in the zoological community at that time. I was able to, snag a couple of them in the beginning, and it was like it kind of opened up my eyes to perspective on how to house snakes in a more, listening to snakes, right? Listen to what their needs are and adapting to their needs rather than what some superficial commercial entity, says buy this and this will work. And it kind of ran from there. And I progressed through colubrids and, I don't know, people probably don't remember, but I was doing ball pythons back in the late 90s and early 2000s, long before kind of the craze here. And I actually got out of it, stepped away from the ball pythons around 2005 and just immersed myself more into what is now my passion, which is the short-tail pythons. I mean, I've been doing them since, 94. But back then we just dealt with imports, wild. I'm going to classify, I'm going to step back a second. Not imports. They were wild collected, wild caught, like noosed around the neck, scarred, mean ass little sub-adults and adults.
Wow.
And there's imports that are coming in. They got a clue. They started farming these things. And my first captive bred actually at that time were Borneo shorttails. I got in 99. And in fact, if you look over my shoulder, if everybody can see that, that's one of the two first captive born Borneos I ever bought in 1999.
Wow.
All right. They don't live 15 years, guys. They'll go 30 plus years. So
It's crazy because Dave's spoken about that. I think, what were we talking about? What kind of monitor are you talking about? That you said the diet's so fucked that they don't live past a certain time.
Oh, we were talking about like savanna monitors and just their dieting and just obesity and killing them at an early age.
Right.
Wow. So here's another point.
Well, and it's not that the animals can't thrive in captivity. It's just we have to adapt to their needs. And this is the big issue. I've heard time and time again, and I'm sorry if I'm going off on a tangent, but, everybody's like, hey, RHACS are bad. Whoa, wait a minute. Think about that for a second. RHACS are not good for certain species. 100%. They work really good for fossorial species and other snakes that need to have that more comfortable security of not seeing every movement that's going on around them. And with the short tails, for the longest time, we used to think that they were like, out in some forest, sitting on the ground, looking at everything in some swampy environment. Kept them too hot, kept them too wet, and kept them in an open glass aquarium. I'm going to tell you, you throw them in a shaded enclosure where they still get light, but they're able to sequester themselves away from that. They're sitting at 78 to 80 degrees. They can hide underneath their man-made leaf litter of the paper, and they thrive. And not only do they thrive, they survive. Not only do they survive, but they thrive. And what time is it? It's too late for me to go start pulling animals out of the cages. They're Jekyll and Hyde. I go back there and grab them out at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12, all the way up to about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I can pull these things out like big spaghetti noodles.
They're knocked out.
Now they're Jekyll and Hyde, man. The hide comes out and they're like, they want food. So I'm a little more deliberate when I grab them out now.
So then when you first got your Borneos in, did you put them in an aquarium? Did you throw a lot of wet bedding in there? Did you do it all the ways you thought it was supposed to be?
Yeah. The first guy I went to, that was an old school pet supply guy. And he's like, you know what? Take the top of a critter keeper, put it at the bottom of your glass aquarium, 20-gallon long, fill it up with about 1.5 inches of water, throw a bunch of, mulch on top of it, crank it up to 88 degrees, and they'll thrive. And I'm going to tell you, I did that, and it lasted about 7 days. That thing wanted to rip my face off. And it was a juvie Borneo, Python Brightensteiny. And I was like, what is going on with this? You know, that's not what I expected. And for one, I ordered I wanted a blood python. He's like, well, here's a Borneo blood. You know, this is back in 94, you know, 93, 94. They thought they were all one. They were one species with subspecies. Started talking with some people that had been around a while, and they're like, you know, Trey, have you ever been to Borneo? Everybody's like, have you ever been to Borneo? Of course not. I'm a Midwestern boy.
Yeah.
And they're like, you know, you go into the deep jungles of Borneo. Yeah, it's hot on the edges in the coastal areas. Go inside, and the rainforest is a lot cooler. So start turning your temps down. So I started going with 82, 83 in the beginning. And they also said they're not in the swamps. You know, I mean, there are, you know, it's moist and humid, but it's the air that's damp and humid, not the ground. Otherwise, they start getting these nasty skin infections.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, you know, I'll give it a go. Changed it up. The personality changed overnight.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. And, you know, you get that. Anybody who's ever had short tails in the past, especially wild collected, they all come in with this sort of respiratory distress. You know, they bubble, they pop, and everything else. And you're like, what the heck is going on? You know, is it pneumonia? And it's just their natural reaction to dry air. Kind of like if you sit in an airplane, you drive, you know, that dry air is like 10% humidity.
Yeah.
You start building humidity, you know, mucus, and they start gasping on that because they don't have a diaphragm to move it. Well, they started, you know, playing around with trying not to have, in the Midwest is tough, man. I'm telling you, especially in December. In January, it's really dry. It's cool. You get that condensation in the glass, and that's where you start realizing glass don't work. Yeah, you put them in a glass, you put them in a regular snake cage. Plastic helps avoid or at least minimize some of that condensation. But I started realizing through trial and error, these animals actually survive better at cooler temperatures. You don't need to provide crazy dampness, but you had to provide a good, healthy humidity. And the one thing about them, more than anything else, is even if you put them in some dry conditions, clean water. They are anal about their clean water. They might as well.
Amen, brother. I love it.
Oh. But I tell you, a lot of snakes are like that. They're not good. They're smart, man.
I mean, I don't know how many times I've seen from my own eyes me change a whole room full of waters. I leave and I come back for something that I forget, turn the light on, and they're all drinking. And it's like, It's like, hello, something tells them, hey, there's fresh water. Let me take advantage of this right now. So like, why make them wait fucking 4 or 5 days? Like, give them fresh water as much as you possibly can.
And we're not talking Bambi little sips, man. They got their whole head in the water, and they're like siphoning that water out, and you could literally watch it drain from the bowl. You know, so clean water is key. And I know when you had Dom on there, he was changing water 3 times a week. Perfect, man, because if that water gets, you know, and everybody's water quality is a little different in municipalities. If you let that water stay stagnant, or it gets that kind of glossy film over the top, get rid of it. Get some fresh water in there.
100%.
And I'll be honest, and even with hatchlings, people don't realize they don't know how to drink. You got to teach them how to drink.
Yeah.
If you don't give them fresh water, they don't even know, you know. So yeah, I get on my soapbox with that.
I think is that my it's my phone. God, again, that's so weird that it does that. I did bring something up on Dominic's episode about you know, I noticed Brian Cusco on one of his a few years ago, he had babies over water. And I was told that that's kind of like not a hack, but something that a lot of people didn't know, that's kind of what you need to do for some baby that don't drink water on their own or something like that. Is that correct? Is that what you ever did?
So there's a couple different ways of getting around that, but yes. So they need a lot of humidity, a lot of fresh water in the beginning, and some people will provide them on a very thin layer of fresh water. And I found over time that tends to fall pretty quickly. There's other aspects to that, but it is the important aspect of it is that you got to get them conditioned to being deliberate on their part to get fresh water. And some of them don't get it. Some literally, you almost have to put their heads in the water bowl, which I don't advise. But, you know, in some cases, it is one of those cases where they don't know how to seek out the water, because instinctively in the wild, water's all around, or, you know, because it's constantly raining out there. And it's not necessarily that they're in the water. It's just that the rainwater comes across, beads on their head. It's like anybody who's ever had a bearded dragon, you spray the head of a bearded dragon, they won't drink out of a bowl. You spray their head and they arch their back, they tilt their head, and they let that water run down into their mouth. So rainfall tends to trigger that. And I think in some cases, people want to be able to, well, if I put them in water, that'll help. Yeah, okay, but it's not necessarily the natural instinct. If you spray them on top of the head, sometimes that helps. And I tend not to even go that far. I actually provide them well saturated frozen thawed as early as possible, and they get a lot of the water content from there. You'll also find that a little bit of saturating their substrate in their cages the first maybe 2 months helps them avoid the dehydration. They learn to drink on their own, you know, pretty quickly.
Is that first shed super crucial too? Like I heard sometimes, you know, the first shed could be something really like ass kicking, and if it doesn't go smooth the first time, or I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. What's the deal with some of the first sheds being pretty bad?
They are the wildest species of snakes. They don't shed for 4 or 5 months later. Wow. Everybody's used to, you know, I mean, there's snakes that come out of, you know, their birth, they shed right away or they hatch. Other ones take, you know, 10 to 14 days. Short tails are like, no, man, we like our skin. We're going to hang on to it. And I've had them go as long as 6 months before they have their first shed.
Wow.
And so it's a little bit of a different dynamic, because, you know, the trigger, old school trigger was you waited for a snake to shed, you offered it food, it ate, maybe shed one or, you know, maybe 2 more times, and they're ready for sale. I've kind of gone with a little bit more of a long-term approach, is to say, listen, sometimes they need a little bit more coaching over the long run. I don't necessarily say you have to wait till their first shed 4 or 5 months out. But you definitely want to be able to make sure that they're getting a good, you know, feeding along the way. And if a new owner is buying them, you have to let them know it hasn't had its first shed yet. So don't be surprised if it doesn't happen for, you know, a longer term than what they would expect, especially if they're coming from ball pythons. So
when do you offer the first meal then? Since technically, since you were supposed to wait for the first shed, which a lot of people are on the fence about that to begin with. Yeah. When is a good time to offer a first meal for the short tail, since it doesn't shed for so long?
Yeah, I'm getting into my secret recipe here. So first things first, I take all the babies, and I actually communally keep my short tails together for up to 10 to 14 days. So they're usually kept 5 to a container, 1 water bowl, usually some type of like shop towel or paper towel substrate. And that I keep pretty well damp. And I keep mine in vermiculite. But whether you go substrate-less or vermiculite, the key on this one is everybody's like, oh, short tails are nippy. There's a trick to that. Just like puppies. Put them together communally for the first like week and a half, maybe even 2 weeks, depending on how they come out of the egg.
Right.
And they start learning after a while, stop biting because I get bit back. No, seriously, it works.
That's a smart thing. Like, oh shit, whatever I'm doing to them, they're doing back to me.
Yeah, well, it's like when you know, if you grew up with a bunch of brothers, or you know, maybe even a rough sister or tomboy, you know, everybody beat each other up. You learn to have a little bit of temperance. And the short tail, so the first week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, I leave them be, work out the social protocols. And then in about 3 weeks, I offer them their first food. For me, and it doesn't work for everybody, for me, I offer a frozen thawed medium mouse to every baby I hatch out. They take it half the time. If they take it, they're on frozen thawed the rest of their life, at least while they're with me. If they don't, I wait about another maybe 10, 14 days, and then I'll give them a live meal. And that way that kickstarts them into eating. right? And it could be a rat pup or it could be a mouse hopper. The key with short tails, and it's counterintuitive, they like bigger prey. They like, I don't know, for whatever reason, I don't know if they like the challenge or whatever. You give them a pinky, they're going to look at you like, really? Don't waste my time. You got to give them like a medium mouse or something bigger. By the time they've had their 6th meal, which could be at 2 months, they're taking large, maybe jumbo mice for most, for blood pythons. Borneos are a little bit smaller. But as soon as you can get them on frozen thawed, and I know people are advocates of feeding them quickly, large prey from the beginning, like put them on a weekly every 10 days. I'm like, you know what? For the rest of their lives, they got to learn a little bit of a little bit of dietary control. I put them at every 3 weeks when they hatch out, from the very beginning. They're fed every 3 weeks for the first couple of months. And then, if you've got a female or you've got, like, I've actually hatched out babies that were twins. So a normal blood python probably comes out at about 80 grams. I've had them hatch out at 100 grams. You got Borneos, they're usually about 55 to 60 grams. I've had hatchling blood pythons come out at 12 to 13 grams, twins. And I was like, oh my God, these things are never going to eat. They ate 2 days after they hatched. And I fed, now that's where I broke my cardinal rule. I gave them pinkies because they were so freaking small. 6 months out, those twins were as big as their clutch mates that hatched out at 80 grams. Okay. So we got to realize that, the natural world finds a way to survive and we have to adapt around them, not try to force the issue with them. And in those cases, I was feeding them whenever they would eat, try to get them up to size, typical colubrid ball python mindset, give them more calories, let them grow quicker. And they did. They took advantage of it. But with short tails, generally, you got to be real careful. There is such thing as overfeeding them. It's like stuffing sausage. What you put into them doesn't necessarily come out. Or it doesn't come out in the same time frame you'd expect. And they are the ultimate anal retentive snakes. I've had them go, I think the longest I had was 18 months.
What?
No bowel movement after hatching. All right. So, I mean, we're talking like in the formative period. And when this thing actually, laid a turd, it was like, 18 months after hatching. By that point, it was probably
I bet that shit
easily.
stank.
Oh, it was, it was crazy. It was like 3/4 of its body weight, So it does, people don't talk about this, but if their bowel movements are that big, there's underlying issues you have to be conscientious of. Is it because of the urates that are building up? That's the salts, right, in their urine. Is there too much, are you not giving enough water in the body? Not offering it to drink, but is the animal actually drinking that water? So you got to be conscious of that. You also have to realize, I mean, in that case, when that thing shit, its ribs were, the whole body was misshapen because he got rid of this massive turd. And it was like, it was so stretched out, it took a while for it to recover from it.
It's like a later clutch.
Oh man, I'm telling you. I said, and proportionally, when you look at the weight of the mass of what it defecated versus its body weight, that was even more significant than what I've had females like clutches of eggs. That could be 50% of their body weight. This thing was even more than that.
What you got, Dave?
Oh, no. Okay, well, I got a few questions. Problem is, I have like 1,000 questions after that. I couldn't get them out at all. I think I forgot most of them. All right, well, I want to hear like a little bit about how you got to certain places, because you talk about feeding twins at 2 days. At some point, you figured out 2 weeks was better. Now, did you get to that 2 week number because you had tried every day after they hatched to feed them, and you thought the average was about 2 weeks that they were the most like willing, or how'd you get there?
So, a lot of it is, you got to be attentive to the behaviors of the snakes. I'm not the guy who's going to breed like all these crazy morphs and combinations, and that I'm going to listen to the animals themselves, and the animals I have, I know what they want. And I've been doing this long enough to realize, people forget. I used to breed ball pythons, captive bred, normal ball pythons back in the 90s. And a friend of mine told me, so why are you wasting your time? I can get ball pythons for $12 and you're selling them for $75. I said, mine ate. They had no parasites. All right.
Gonna live.
Yeah. And I said, I joked around. I said, mine come with the tapeworm for free because they were bottomless pits. But I paid attention, and if you talk to some of the best keepers out there, they all listened a little bit to the animal itself. What naturally drove the animal to be positively responsive to certain behaviors, eating, just even their normal mannerisms. So in answer to your question, I mean, a lot of times I would look at the animal, I open up the tub, and I stalk my snakes. So I'm kind of looking at them every couple of days. Are you there? How are things going? And it's the responsiveness. When you lift that hide box and you look at them, are they listless or are they active and they're looking up at you like, what? So listening a little bit and paying attention to the animals, trying different things, trial and error.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I learned with wild caught. So with wild caught, it was a constant trial and error. And there was always a pause in between each attempt. It might be a day, might be 2 days. You tried something, it either worked or it didn't. You paid real close attention to the animal, like were their tongue flickers? Did it just kind of sit there listlessly? And in those cases, you kind of sat there and said, all right, maybe food's not the issue. Maybe, are you dry? Is your skin like parchment paper? And I think that those lessons early on taught me a lot to pay attention because I didn't like to lose an animal. I didn't like, we didn't have a choice 30 years ago of taking in animals and wondering whether they're captive bred or imports. They were wild caught imports. It was rare that anybody actually imported something in that was actually bred, and if it was coming out of like Germany or Europe. So you tried what you can until you found some success, and then over time, here we are 30, 40 years later, we have this body of knowledge where people sat there and said, hey, this is what you do on, day 1, day 4, day 12, whatever. It's very prescriptive because people have contributed to that body of knowledge. But back in the day, we didn't have that. I mean, it was, we didn't have internet, so I couldn't Google search like how to feed my snake. I was usually messaging some university chat room in a hope, and then within a week or two, I'd get a response back. So,
what a time.
Oh man, I'm gonna tell you, hey, we're in the golden age now, man. Come on.
Yeah, we got it way too easy now, man. I say that all the time. I feel like I came into an era where it's like, fuck, man. It's like, I mean, if your passion's there, I mean, you got all the information in the world. It's just all about finding what best suits you,
Right. Yeah.
Go ahead, Dave.
And we're talking millions of animals, I mean, we're back in the days, it was, I looked at the quotas back in the late 90s and we were like out of Borneo. The live Borneo animal exportation typically ran around 500 animals a year. That's worldwide. That's coming out of Borneo. Not all of them to the United States. So, 500 animals, maybe let's say 3/4 of them came to the United States. So we're talking 400 animals across the entire United States. I'm like, I don't know if I would actually bump elbows with somebody else that actually had a Borneo,
Yeah.
And,
true.
Just being able to exchange information with people. It's like, well, how did you deal with this? Well, back then people would say, well, this worked for me for Burmese or retics or whatever. And you started doing a little bit of extrapolation from those, shareable moments.
So, tell me a little bit about the community. Like, you've been working with these as long as you have. I'll be honest, outside of a few guys, I don't know a lot of guys that are just solely Borneos or short tails. Like, how has that community grown over like the last decade? Or do you guys feel like you've kind of been about where you've been at?
So one thing I'll correct you on, it's not guys. All right. So
People,
this is probably one of the most diverse communities you'll get. You've got, I mean, my customer base, when I look at it, and I'm a big diversity, equity, inclusion in work. I look at demographics. I try to understand customers and how people, appreciate certain things. And it's interesting to note that by and large, as long as I've been doing this, half of my customer base is either couples or women that are looking at snakes that are representative of something that they like. They're looking for an animal that represents a certain color or body shape. And the community of support that we have in the short tail community has always been very positive minded, very encouraging and supportive. And I think a lot of that is because we tend to have a very diverse mix of people that are very supportive by nature, and I love that. I love that from the very beginning. When you look at literally I'm going to try and choose my words very selectively here, but you got somebody like Tracy Barker, who is a matron in the industry, not only just for snakes, but for short tails especially. She's been a nurturing influence in so many ways, just in the short tails, right? And we look at what she's done. I mean, there's not a morph that exists today that I don't think she's had some part to play. And yeah, Dave Barker, of course, I mean, both of them are, the couple involved in it, but Tracy's been really the driver behind the short tails. And you look at people like, Kara Norris, and you look at some of the other second, third generational supporting women in this space. They have a very strong influence on how we actually drive the support for the community, and everybody else kind of gets into it. I mean, it's not like, you hatch something out and everybody kind of jump on them and saying, try to challenge them on what they proved out. Everybody's very encouraging and supportive. Everybody goes, great for you. That's another good one for the short tail community.
Right.
Nobody ever turns around and gets all catty with them and competitive. Because at the end of the day, I think for the most part, most of the people that are in the short tail community are very focused on growing it. They're very real. They recognize that the short tails in general have been misaligned for wrong reasons. The imports, while collected out of Malaysia back in like the freaking 70s and 80s, don't exist anymore. They are no different as babies, as hatchlings, than any other species. And in fact, I want to say more and more, we're finding that they tend to be more laid back, more easy to deal with than some of the other species that are very popular in the pet trade.
Just want to say, Tracy Barker, if you happen to get a clip of this, I need you on the show, and I will watch my mouth. I won't say not one curse word. Trust me, I've been training for this moment. So somebody wants to clip this and send this to Tracy, aka O'Malley's Morph. Send this over to her, please, and hopefully get that legendary woman on this show. I mean, listen, come on, Tracy Barker and her husband Dave. Talk about two iconic pillars in the industry. It's like, man, that'd be a goal of mine.
Well, I told you, my first captive born Borneo came from Dave and Tracy. Actually, and Tracy's the one who I dealt with back in 99 getting it. And she's been supportive ever since, regardless of the fact that I bought, I bought some other snakes from her back in the sort of like right around the beginning of COVID. I think that was in 2019. And I told Tracy, I said, you realize it's been 20 years since I bought a snake from you. And she's just as lovely and endearing and as knowledgeable and as sharing as she was back then. So, but that's what we need. I heard a little bit, MJ, of what you talked about in the beginning. And that's an undercurrent of a reptile, actually even the pet trade in general. And I've seen the darker side of the reptile trade because that's what I deal with. But
right.
It will always exist as much as we try to suppress it. Unfortunately, it still exists, like it does with dogs, cats, exotics.
But Rich,
What?
let me ask you this, Rich. I don't mean to stop you there, but what if it's the same person? Year like we're talking years go by, and then here comes the same person again with the same stuff, just newer stuff this time. It's like, when do we together make a stand, or do we make a stand? Like because I don't know, I've heard many points on how the more noise we make, right, the more whistleblowers there are, then the more of a chance of this coming back and biting us in the ass, where it fucks all of us, right? So where do we how do we ride this line, in your opinion?
It's easy. We set the standards. We as a community are the ones that aspire to what we expect from others. And whether we drive it through our own spending, our own dollars, or we, basically call out the ones that, the Michael Vicks on the dog fighting, right? This is our responsibility to sit there and say, that's not acceptable from the community that represents the larger body of keepers. And, there's some of us who deal with it sort of more as a cleanup. Like for almost, the entire 25 years I've been dealing with this, I've dealt with the FBI, Department of Homeland Security. I've dealt with the Department of Agriculture for the state and the feds, Fish and Wildlife, more on the recovery side, right? This is where we go in and we have to recover animals, and hopefully we can save as many as we can, because somebody failed to manage themselves and failed in their responsibilities as an animal owner, whether it was a broker, flipper, wholesaler, breeder, whatever. You have a responsibility, and unfortunately, with the pet trade, it's always going to exist until we find a way to root that out, and the only way to do that is to set a bar, set a bar of expectations. And I'm not talking about regulations or legal standards. I'm just talking about as a community to sit there and basically call these people out. But we also have to be cautious about calling out based on superficial observations. We need to make sure that there's a legitimate call to arms when somebody's actually doing something improper.
Yeah.
And I've seen it. I mean, we've seen cases where, and we're starting to see this more and more, right? Where there are keepers that at one time held a lofty reputation as sort of the pinnacle of the community, right? They did things really well. They set the standards. They were pioneers. But then over time, they either lost perspective or they fell into situations that put them at a disadvantage for maintaining that level of care. And rather than taking the responsible action of saying, you know what, I need to start offloading, I need to find homes for these animals, they'd rather degrade their quality of care and let the animals go into some unfortunate state.
And they almost not care to even get caught about it. It's like it's to the point where it's like, I mean, some of this evidence, it's like, holy shit, there's no dodging this. I mean, you have people like who just worked at this facility telling us this, right? So it's kind of like that deep, but it's just, I don't know. Go ahead.
So I'm going to tell you, as a professional, I'm a financial compliance guy. So I deal with the governmental regulations. I deal with financial compliance.
Respect.
And it's this thing. If you see something, say something. In the financial world, we have these whistleblower protection. And the reason for that is because people have this, I'm going to say, almost like a guarded approach to responding to situations that they see that are wrong, because the person involved is either an authority or has a reputation. They've been around a long time, and they're afraid to say something for, either they're afraid of retribution, they're afraid of being cast as a I don't know what you want to call it, but they're basically just they're calling out on somebody who's got a reputation, and people remember the old reputation, but not factoring in the new conditions that are an issue. And in those cases, people are like, I'm afraid to come up front and say something. And people need to feel at least safe enough to sit there and say, listen, I've got enough where I can sit there and say for certain, this is not acceptable, right? And I'm not talking about these freaking crazy, PETA organizations are taking pictures at the most inopportune times, some, cage is dirty, that, and it's like just getting ready to be cleaned, but it's, I mean, there's cases where people have been neglectful and abusive to the animals over time because they've just gotten to the point that you just gave up. And the unfortunate part is those people should have known when to call it quits.
Dave, I want Dave, if you're okay with this, Dave, you gave me a good example of something that you've had an experience of. I don't need names or anything, but I remember I was calling you when this Sansom stuff was pretty fresh, I guess a few weeks back, and I was pretty pissed. I was like, dude, fuck this guy. I wanted to go off. And you told me when there was another situation where somebody abandoned their collection for a while, and it was like instead of like taking it to a Facebook group, a few guys rallied together. They went over to that place and cleaned it up or something like that. And it was like kind of like, I don't know. Can you kind of talk about that effect that you broke down to me that one time?
Well, it was, more just discussing, different reasons why some people might decide why to neglect stuff. Sometimes your own mental state. I do think there's a little bit of a hoarder's mentality that's always been in this hobby. I think there's a hoarder mentality in a lot of us. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the big collections we have. And like I said, sometimes when people need help, they just don't ask for help. They don't have it in them. And it takes people around them to see something that's happening to go in and try to help. So more just, some things happen behind the scenes every once in a while. And, there's always people around willing to help as long as somebody's willing to ask for help. Yeah. But more just talking about that. Like I said, things happen sometimes. There's a lot of variables. Talking about like, you're talking self-regulation. There's a lot of other countries, especially Europe, that have a lot of regulations on cage size, care, so on and so forth. Do you think it's inevitable that we'll get there, like unwillingly, willingly? Do you think it's necessarily even a negative in the hobby?
All right. So, I mean, I tend to be more forward thinking than I think some people in that regard, is to sit there and say, if, recognizing that if there's a problem and you don't want other people to deliver sort of the cure or the chemo, right? Then a lot of times it's better to take control of the situation and say, we're going to dictate it, and in those cases, I think we need to be able to, yes, I mean, I use the term regulation a little lightly. There are established standards that you can create, and we see this in so many other industries, right? You got ISO standards, you've got standards that exist in the business world for certain activities versus something like OSHA, right? Where there's actually regulatory requirements because there's a hazard or a safety incident, right? So in those cases, it's the best practices should be something that are promoted and supported by the industry in a way that encourages that behavior going forward, right? That's not a regulatory model, but it is definitely a reinforceable model that customers and other, I'll call them providers, right? Whether it's a buyer or a broker or whatever, that all subscribe to. And it's like, hey, listen, there's a reason why we want to have this standard. We don't want to go below that, right? So we're talking, and I'll use, not to pick on the dogs, right? There's a difference between going to a recognized AKC breeder versus going to a generic puppy mill, right? Yeah. We need to be able to distinguish what the differences are between those and why they're important as a community. Yeah. And be able to encourage people to sit there and say, hey, by the way, our best consumers regardless, are the most informed consumers, right? I've turned away more prospective customers wanting to buy a short tail because they weren't they weren't ready. They weren't informed enough. I say, listen, guys, you need to get a little bit more advanced because I want you to be successful. These are animals that are very rewarding. You're going to love dealing with them. They're going to be an addiction all on their own. And the best part about it is they're cheaper and they're less damaging as an addiction than other things. But I said, at the end of the day, you want to be successful. And I said, we need to encourage people to do that. And it's tough. It's really tough to do that. But if we can get to that point, we can avoid the regulation. We can avoid sort of the bureaucratic over, sort of a simplification, because that's the problem with regulations is often the people that are dealing with the regulations, detailing the regulations, often look at a vanilla solution and not something that's a little bit more specific. And when we're dealing with exotics, we're dealing with reptiles, you cannot apply a vanilla simplified solution to everything. RHACS are not a solution for all species. Talk to anybody who's got dry MARSHON or any of these other active colubrids that are all over the place, right? I would not want to put a Bolin's in it. Another one,
Yeah.
So there is not one size fits all. So it's better for the community to sort of establish what those acceptable standards are. But it takes input from everybody. And I'll be honest with you, I wrote my book on short-tail care because I saw a trajectory that was scary. I saw people being fearful of keeping short-tails and not seeing the potential rewarding experiences of keeping them successfully. And all I did was, basically collectively take in information from not only my own experiences, but others that I respected, and put it down at least in a useful format for, at a point where people could sit there and say, hey, I could get a book. It starts me out on the journey. And from there, maybe they can pursue it a little bit further. I'm still waiting for Dave and Tracy to come out with a short tail book. So, because it's going to be a book I'm going to buy 2 copies of. So, because I'll wear out the first one. But, we need to have information out there. We need to be able to support the community to say, you want to keep this? Do it right. Invest in the knowledge that you're going to take to be successful for the next whatever, I don't know anybody that these days, they buy one and they want another one after it. It's like potato chips. You can't stop at just one.
I think that's the one, that's kind of like the one good thing that's been the common entry into the reptile industry. It's like 9 out of 10 people aren't just getting a reptile. Like they're getting one, they're getting another. Some are even getting into one breeding project and then dabbling into another species, which I always like, fuck, man. I feel like, I love the ball pythons, Rich, because that's what brought me into this. But my brain didn't really start working and thinking big picture wise. And so I started working with like the stuff behind me and stuff, or more importantly, monitors. Like, I'm just really geeked out over these monitors. You know what I mean? It's like we're talking like cold-blooded dogs here. It's something else. And I know you have your fair share even working with certain monitor species, correct? Or
Yep.
What species were those?
Oh my gosh, where do I start? So I've worked with Savannah, Nile, Water, Bluetail, Mangrove, Timor, Argus, and I've gotten the chance to play with Komodo, but that's a separate issue. Crocodile, and what else? Oh my gosh. My heart is set on Kimmy's. I want Kimberly, Varanus galuridae. I want those. That's where I'm going to end up landing probably within the next.
Those things are so cool looking, man. Something about those I just love. They're quick.
They're like a Parenti in a shortened format, and you got to love the Odatria. They're all fantastic.
Yeah.
But that's, I don't want anybody to misinterpret it. That's, to me, monitors are next level reptiles. They're ones that you don't just buy and stick in a shelf and keep. They require interaction. They require enrichment and stimulation. And conversely, they were going to give it back to you. It's a rewarding experience you're going to love.
That's what I love.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why, like, you know, it's crazy to think, you know, God bless the young generation out there that we have, but they're very, not they, I just say there's a certain community of reptile keepers out there who are just like super against us keeping ball pythons in racks because they have documentation showing that they've been in trees and stuff like that. But I mean, come on, like, let's be real. Something that is that depressed. What was that? Was that a cat? What was that? Was that a spider or something? That was creepy.
That was the fly that's been fucking with me this entire time. Yeah.
I was like, dude, that looked like a ghost. I was like, what was that? I don't even know what I was talking about. What was I just talking about? Fuck, Dave. What was I talking about?
I don't even remember.
God damn it! I was gonna have a good point right now. What? I'm sorry, Rich. You're smarter than both of us. What were we just talking about right now?
I think we're running from the parallel.
Oh, I got it. I found it. The rack situation. Okay, I'm just saying there had to be a point in time where ball pythons would either crash or something wouldn't have longevity within keeping ball pythons in racks. I mean, I always said this, right? I love the animals behind me, but God damn it, man, these are the ones that worry me the most. So when I have someone who wants to come into my room and they just want to see something that they're not snake people, right? But they're like, I want to show them something that they're guaranteed going to love. And it's going to be a very like intro into what you're about to get into. I always go to my ball pythons, right? And my ball pythons are, you know, like, okay, maybe one out of hundreds have a stuck shed maybe at top because it's just common, right? But whatever, I'll grab another one. Here's this beautiful damn glorious ball python, and you don't even know what I'm about to tell you what this is, and they just fall in love with it, right? God damn, you've been to ball pythons when they were imported. Something would tell us right now that these ball pythons should not be in racks at this point. Like, we would see something.
Well, how about this? Do you remember the old pictures of how Tracy used to keep her ball pythons?
I don't. No.
It was like a 4 to 6 foot vision cage with like a big high box of moths or cypress in it, big water bowl, I think, shavings and the rest of it. And that's how they bred them for years. It slowly just started shrinking down into rack systems. I think they got some of the early freedom breeders back in the day. I don't know. I think they were either red or green, if I remember right. But yeah, they're just something changed. And the reality is, if you watch the animals in the wild, even if you watch Dave's documentary, a lot of these animals that you're finding were underground, were in burrows. The comment about them being in trees was based on the rainy season. When the ground was wet, they were going up in the trees. So again, you know, when it comes to the body language or watching your animals, you know, I say that when I talk to BOA guys. Everyone's all like, they're so hard to breed. And I'm like, but if you just watch your animals and read your animals and pay attention, they're not as hard as you think. So kind of like what he's been saying.
Yeah, and I think the misinformation that's occurred is ball pythons could breed in racks. And I think the mindset with people was, oh, well, if I can get away with a minimal square footage, I can get more concentration of animals in my collection. Therefore, it's acceptable. And I think that mindset took away from the more the more I gotta call it important perception is, but what's really good for the animal in the long run, right? So I've used RHACS for years. However, I use my ball pythons for outreach activities. So they're getting handled by tons of people. They're able to navigate all new environments. They're getting different smells. They're getting different enrichment, stimulation. They actually go to the RHACS to rest, and this is one of the differences is that we have to kind of look at a little bit of the dynamics of how we keep. And, are we going to keep animals like cattle where we are going to eventually, keep them in there for 2 years and slaughter them? And I said, you can't look at it that way. We have to be able to look at animals and give them the opportunity, if they're going to be used for a positive long-term investment of breeding and procreating the breed and down the road, let's maintain them in a healthy environment. And that may mean let's increase their standards, right? It's not a CB70 anymore. It's a 9706 or whatever. You know, give them more enrichment. And I did rescue for so many years that I was getting ball pythons in long before I bred ball pythons. And, you know, I saw people keeping these things in the equivalent of 55, 75, 110-gallon aquariums. One ball python. Okay. And these were animals that when you pulled them out, you can tell the differences. They had great muscle definition. There was no obesity. They were socially interactive with their keepers, you know, and this is important stuff. You know, you tend to look at this and say, this is a healthy animal compared to an animal that's been shoved in a shelf for 10 years and has never really had any enrichment. It's never had any opportunity to exercise. So the question is, what are we doing? You know, are we really trying to promote? And it would be interesting to see, I don't want to wait, but 10 or 15, 20 years from now, see what's the viability of ball pythons in captivity compared to what we dealt with 20 years ago, health-wise, fertility-wise, you know. And I think you're going to find that animals that are given more enrichment, that are given more access to exercise, and I would say choices of habitat conditions, you know, even if they're microhabitats, to see if there's any changes in the way, you know, the animals thrive in the long run.
Well, getting rid of my ball pythons now.
Well, and
No,
this
it's not
is
get rid of them. It's just give them a, you know, hey, I got a whole rack of 9706s if you want to set your.
They're gone, buddy. They're gone after this.
so with, and I don't know how much to pay attention to the ball python market, but the ball python market moves very fast. Every 5 years, it's a completely different game. With that being said, you know, a lot of these animals that might have been foundation animals in someone's collection 5 years ago are now either being sold as pets or being sold to possibly other breeders. Do you think an animal that starts its life out maybe in the breeding, but then in its second part of its life, after a 5-year span, goes into the private trade, more of the pet trade? What do you think the long term on that would be for these animals? Because really, if you look at ball pythons, I feel like that's the way it's been for years.
But I tell you, they thrive. You know, they may start out limited. Reptiles are incredibly resilient. And I've seen animals come in 15, 20 years old and go through growth spurts. I mean, it's incredible. You know, I took in different species. I took in a boa constrictor that was 7 years old that was 27 inches long. And we're talking a BCI. So, you know, and within 6 months, that thing went from 27 inches to 6 feet. And it lived for 26 years. Okay. So they can, you know, and it was given ample opportunity to thrive. It probably could have lived longer. Who knows? I've seen ball pythons come in that were on the lean side, you know, kept in a small, undersized aquarium or whatever, and they were given something bigger and they grew. So, you know, these animals have the opportunity to recover pretty cool, you know.
Well, and so Russo has a female. I think he's been breeding for almost 28 years. And Graziani has a female. I talked to him about it in the past. I think its name was like Togo. But the interesting thing about that animal was it was the original female he used for the original pastel that ever came in the country. Okay. And he did that exact same pairing like 20 years later, about 2 years ago, with the original male and the original female for the first pastel clutch. So I don't know if the problem is so much the size of the cage, but with a larger cage, you know, somebody who might be on a weekly or 5-day schedule looking at their animal maybe shouldn't have an animal in a smaller rack system they can't keep an eye on. But for those people who are doing daily spot cleaning, so on and so forth, I think the longevity of these animals in these racks wouldn't be an issue until there's buildup in bacteria, God forbid a virus. But I think it's more of the self-regulating on how you're going to keep your animals and figure out the best thing for how you're keeping them.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm going to use the example because you had a larger breed dog that kind of jumped around. You know, you live in a 1-bedroom apartment with a Great Dane, but if you take the dog for a walk a couple times a week, is that sufficient, right?
Yeah.
And I think the biggest part of this is, as a community, what are we doing to do better, right? And it's not what have we done so far. We get better with the more knowledge we have. The question is, when we get a better set of data, we start looking at it and saying, okay, so that was unacceptable. Let's try to improve ourselves. And, you know, this is a little bit of the, you know, a little bit of the counter discussion to the cancel culture, right? We sit there and say, hey, those guys that were in the industry 20, 30 years ago, they used to do some pretty bad things. Well, like, were they bad at the time is the first question I have. And where are they at now? And if they're at a point now where they're sitting there saying, you know what, I did it all wrong. I learned. I got better. That's the part that's important. It's a lesson that we all look to improve on our own care. And I'm looking at the short tails. Perfect example. We used to keep them too hot. We used to keep them too wet. You know, there's still like a lot of latitude on how you keep them. Do you want to put them on cocoa? Do you want to put them on cypress? Do you want to put them on paper? You know, there's certain things that at the end of the day, does it really make a big difference? And it might be more individualized, but as a keeper, you should be cataloging all these different elements to sit there and say, what's in my tool bag when I'm working with, and I've got a lot of short tails, is I've got some that are like, yeah, they don't do really well on a smaller cage. I got to get, you know, they're constantly running around the enclosure, and it's not a breeding issue or anything else. It's like, all right, so fine. You want to play greyhound? I'm going to give you an enclosure big enough to go have your fun. And if that's what it takes, it's what it takes, right? I have other animals that are sitting there and say, hey, you know, I'm like my owner. I'm happy and sassy, just sitting on my butt doing nothing, you know. It's, all right, fine, you know. But the key on that one is keep conditions clean, keep conditions to the point that you can emulate their natural requirements as closely as possible, with the flexibility of giving them a choice of whether they're like, you know, I used to joke around about the old McDonald's commercial, keep the hot side hot and the cold side cold. And I may be really dating myself on that one, but
how far back? Hold on, I got to ask you, how far back is that one? Because I mean, I remember the McDonald's Moon Man. Remember the McDonald's Moon Man?
Oh yeah, yeah. I want to say it's probably, I want to say almost 40 years ago with the hot side hot.
Okay, yeah, definitely don't know.
You know, yeah, but giving, you know, people tend to lose the perspective with RHACS is that there's still a thermal gradient that you need to emulate, right? You need a cool side, you need a warm side. And it's kind of funny in my short, you know, this room, one of my reptile rooms that I have, this room is kept at 79.5 degrees Fahrenheit, 24/7, 365 days a year. It goes through 7 air changes an hour. All right. So I got fresh air. I don't have to worry about stagnation. But the temperature, the ambient temperature is perfectly suited for short tails. However, I have enclosures that have, every single enclosure still has a heat range that they can warm themselves up. And that heat range is actually about 5 to 6 degrees higher than the ambient temperature. So the front of the cage might be room temperature at 79, let's say, but the back temperature might be 85. And I've got animals that will move back and forth throughout the course of the year, looking to see what's appropriate. And the key on that one is giving the animals a choice, and it actually helps minimize the stress that they deal with, right? Yeah. So I've got animals like, I mean, you know, aside from feeding night, I could go on a Saturday morning, I can open up any of my cages, stick my hand in, grab the snake out, and it's no different than grabbing your pillow. All right?
Right.
All right, now, you know, flash forward to 9 o'clock at night, and it's like, you know, you're dealing with the velociraptors from Jurassic Park, you know, because they're expecting food, but you gotta love them. But But that's the type of stuff that you want. You want the natural behaviors to exhibit on the animals. And then as a keeper, we adapt around them. Don't force them to adapt to what we want, because you're going to fail.
Yeah, I mean, something that's thrown me off a little bit. I mean, this goes back to just paying attention to your animal. But, you know, I was told that some females show you signs of either building or something by staying on the cooler side. You know what I mean? And they're more favoring the cooler side versus the warmer side. But then you have certain females that never just leave the warm side.
Right.
Like this girl right here. She never leaves the warm side. I produced a clutch with her 2 years ago. But the whole time, even through ovulation, she never left the warm side. That's all she ever did. So I was wondering, you know, is that just a personality thing, or, you know, she just likes to be warm, or, I mean.
Well, and it could be the fact that she's just an egg producing monster. I mean, that's, you know, so that's the part, right? You know, I joking around with my wife, because she's like, I walk in the house and she's like, oh my gosh, it's so hot in here. And I'm like, I'm freezing my butt off. So, you know, every animal, you know, warm-blooded or otherwise,
Right.
Has their own physiological requirements and comfort zones, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to be, as keepers in general, we need to be at least open-minded to the fact that no two animals are alike, and they may require different things. So give them a range of options and work around that, right? At the end of the day, what's our job? Our job is we're basically janitors. We're cleaning up the piss and shit. We're giving them fresh water, so we're the cafeteria workers in this case.
Facts.
And, you know, give them an environment where at least everything else is pretty solid, and then we're just keeping tabs on, you know, what needs to be maintained. And listen to them, look at them. You know, I mean, I've got certain animals that I just learned over time that have a sassiness to them. So they're going to hiss at me, and anybody who's been with short tails realizes a hiss doesn't mean that they're going to kill you, right? It's just like, oh, you know, I'm going to wag my tail and bark at you like a dog.
But if you never heard it before, it is alarming. It's like, oh.
Well, you know, you got an animal that's 6 feet, 5.5 feet, but they've got some pretty impressive lungs, you know.
Oh man.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the excitement of keeping short tails, is they are not shy to express their opinions, and they're going to keep an eye on you. They're like, what are you up to? And, you know, I love it when you walk into the reptile room, and I kind of had this canyon effect of two sides. You walk in and you see all the eyes kind of watching you, you know, and they're like, yeah, what are you up to? You know, and unlike other people, I actually do outreach with short tails. Everybody's like, what are you thinking? They're going to kill everybody, right? And I'm like, I pull them out of the cage, I bag them up, I'm out at a show, and I actually have people that'll hold them. But the key is, I know the animals, I know their personalities, I know what they'll accept and what they won't accept.
Right.
And perfect example, right? I've actually had somebody walk up behind me with a young kid, grab the head of my short tail and shake it around like it was a rattle. And I was like, oh my gosh, you know, and nobody ever, you know, there was no blood loss, nobody got eaten, you know. And I think part of it is, you know, for one, I wouldn't bring an animal out if I thought there was going to be a risk of that. But, you know, there's always that underlying risk. But it's managing the animals. Short tails are not a snake that you hold like a ball python or a chondro that's going to wrap around you, right?
Two hands.
You know? Oh, it's like a baby. You're cradling it, because they're just like this big. It's Jabba the Hutt in a small version.
And it's holding so much weight in the middle too. It's like, you know, you got to cradle that.
Well, and you want to piss them off, you'll hold them up in the middle, like they're like a motor
really?
or something, and they're like, that's the most uncomfortable poise. And you know, people are like, oh, why did the snake get responsive? I said, well, what'd you do? They're like, oh, well, yeah. You know, you grab me by the neck and hold me up in the air, I'm going to do the same thing to you. So maybe a little bit more. That's a different issue.
So, carpet python, short-tail pythons, I feel like one of the biggest challenges in the hobby has always been the misinformation about it. You know, I really hate to say this, but for the last 20 years, I've probably told people that in the wild, they're born and then they go into the swamps and they stay there. Because somebody told me that 20 years ago, and I've probably repeated it like 1,000 times now, so it's fact. You know, when it comes to like going out and finding information, like you even said, turning people away from your tables, you know, with YouTube, it seems like the most sensationalized video is going to get a bunch of views, which is going to make more people want to see it because this one has 100, that one has 10,000. I guess the point I'm getting at is, you know, when you talk about turning people away, you know, wouldn't it be nice if we had a single source information where that people just knew to go there compared to having 100 options and maybe 99 being them wrong?
Dan, or excuse me, Rich, hold that answer. Hold that answer. Hour and 25 minutes deep. This has been a legendary podcast. We need to get the likes up right now out of the respect of Dave's dogs. Let's get the likes up right now. Please hit it, Rich.
Yeah. Rich's smile was fake there. He thought it was going to be about him, but it was about my dogs.
No, come on. What's up about the dog?
Now we don't talk about that dog, man. Don't you worry about that dog.
Go ahead, Rich.
No, so I mean, yeah. So debunking the myths and directing people to truth, and it's a tough thing, right? Today's world, the sensational sells, and you know, I was a victim of it, just like everybody else. It's like you go off of anecdotal information, you go off of hearsay from other keepers, and I was professionally skeptical because my success, or I should say lack of success, demonstrated otherwise. Wow. So over time, I started gravitating towards more, I would say, proven resources. So we're talking scientific papers, observations in the field. And I started geeking out on this side of it. And it's what ultimately led me to producing the book that I wrote, because I wanted, you know, what you hear on the internet, what you see is not necessarily with the same degree of, I don't know, called validity that you see when it's in print. And I wanted to at least make sure that there was something out there. You know, and I'm the type of person, you know, just because I put it in print doesn't mean it's 100% factually accurate all the time. And I'm like, but it opens up the conversation. Somebody says, that's a baseline. That's a starting point. Because the internet is great, but it's also really bad for misinformation. Yeah. And that's also the reason why when I started pulling together the details on it, why I reached out to some really reliable peers that I was like, hey, can you help me out on this? You know, I want to make sure that my observations are consistent with your observations. And we at least got something out there. It's not the only, you know, if you look at ball pythons, bearded dragons, leopard geckos, there's numerous written literature out there on the subject. And I think I would like to see short tails kind of fall into that same space with the information provided in whatever other documents come out, reinforcing a lot of that information. Because I found even when you reach out to a zoological institution, I told them, I said, hey, by the way, you know, how do you keep your Borneos? What references do you cite? And they all came back with the same wrong information.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. No, go ahead, Rich. Sorry.
No. That was it, but it was like, well, where'd you come up with that information? And it was ironically not even scientific. It was anecdotal, and it was based on pet trade myths and misinformation. So I was like, well, there you go. Yeah. And people are getting it from a zoo, so that kind of authenticates the misinformation a little bit. And you know, I want to say republish, but I want to do another edition to the book that I issued to add even more information on it. But the basics of it haven't changed. I mean, the same success, captive husbandry and everything else still applies. And I think the feedback I get from other keepers who followed sort of that same recipe affirm the same thing, and they're like, the animals are thriving, they're doing great, and by the way, they're not ripping my face off.
Yeah.
So this might be a weird thing to say, but kind of my point or the comment I made before about having a single source for certain information, knowing that it's reliable. Do you think it would benefit your book if you were the complete short tail book in the series of other completes that are in the industry right now?
Say that again, because I think I kind of
I was talking about the complete series, buddy. Boas, chondros. I've got a few more over here, I'm sure. I got the complete carpet python.
I actually talked to Bob Ashley about publishing through him, and at the time I had already sort of ran down the rabbit hole with Amazon because I had published with them before. But yeah, I mean, it certainly adds a little bit of validity, credentialing as being part of a series of information. I think the other part of it too, that I was worried about was twofold. It was, I'm too much of a business student, price point and distribution. And with Amazon, I saw the opportunity to distribute over a broader community. And at this point, I literally sell worldwide. I mean, I've got people buying books in Japan, Poland, Russia, Germany, France, Italy, a lot of, I mean, Canada's obvious in the US, but, and it wasn't so much that I was looking at just making the book sales. I wanted to be able to create a catalyst for feedback. So I've got people that have reached out to me and said, hey, I bought your book and I keep, and here's some of the things I've observed, and to see if things like, my observations on barometric pressure as it relates to courting and breeding, do they have relevance? And, I'm hearing the same observations, from across the board. And I'll be honest with you, and I couldn't deliver on this one, but the best, I want to say compliment I ever got was I had somebody from Indonesia trying to buy my book. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. I'm like, you're asking to buy a book from a guy writing it in the US when they're like your garter snakes,
It's your backyard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure there's some United States species that are being worked with overseas that they have a better understanding of how to breed them than we do here.
Oh, I
and as silly as it is to say, just kind of going back to saying, a series, I think it does go a long way. And like I said, finding the right source information and, where you have the Barkers that have done a lot of different editions on a lot of different species, people know what they know. It's very rare that they know everything about everything. So, again, with your information getting out there, to tell you the truth, I probably learned more about the species listening to you talk for the last hour and a half than I have in the last 20 years. How do we make sure that everybody knows where to go for the right source then? What was the short tail book before your short tail book? There
wasn't one. That's the issue, right? So I always like to joke around. I'm the fluffer for the Barkers.
Hey, bud, that's hot. Good for you.
I was going to say, Dave, I think Dave's going to like that.
I mean, the biggest issue, I was sick and tired of answering the same, I shouldn't say answering, but I was responding to the same myths over time and time again. And I was like, if I just put this much effort along with the 3-ring binder of data that I collected over time, and it didn't have to be, it was never going to be a masterpiece on the level that I would expect Dave and Tracy to publish. It's a complement to entry level. I mean, veteran keepers benefit from it as well, if nothing else, just to reaffirm what, again, it's my observations and other observations of other keepers that we share with other people. And I think that's the part of this that we overlook, is that we share knowledge, or even if it's observations, there's always going to be deviance from some of those observations. And at least people could sit there and say, hey, this gives me an idea where to start, right? it was, if nothing else, it was there to debunk the bad information, the stuff that don't keep them over 84 degrees. Otherwise, you're going to get you're going to get a great white shark in a 10-gallon tank.
Right.
That's not what we wanted. We wanted people to be successful with keeping these, because for those of us that have been doing it for a long time, they're really rewarding. I mean, they're really a fun snake to keep. I mean, come on. I mean, everybody loves Burmese and retics and, the big snakes, but it's like, at the end of the day, the investment in acupuncture and chiropractic care is a little unreasonable. So
it's like anything driving's fun other than a ball python. But I'm saying,
I got my ball pythons.
I love them. That's just money.
Unfortunately, they're going to probably be around with me until I die at the
Same
rate
here.
they're going.
I agree.
But
I like making money.
but you want something that is rewarding. And there's not a day when I'm taking care of my animals. These guys, they will challenge you in a healthy way. And I don't mean that in aggressive. They're going to try, you're trying to figure out how to play dodgeball. But it's just that, they're looking at you and you're like, all right, what's going on? What's your mood today? And, they're huffing and puffing. And you pick them up and you find out, hey, geez, Hognose does a better job than you do. Come on, we're bluffing like and there was nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But you got this potentially 20 to 30 pound snake that's actually, it's about as big as a person's leg. And I'm like, it feels like having a big snake, and yet, they're just kind of like, hey, I'm just cool with whatever you got me going on, And I get testimonials from people that have bought snakes over the years, from myself and from other breeders. And I think it's really rewarding. It reinvests the fact that the passion I have with them, it's contagious, other people, but you have to respect the animal for what they are.
Yeah.
You can't expect, I'm used to ball pythons, so I'm going to buy a clone of a ball python in a bigger package. You're not getting that. Okay. It's more like I'm going from a Chihuahua to a Rottweiler. All right.
Mm.
It's a bigger animal. It's got more personality. It's got more responsibility. But at the end of the day, it's going to give you so much more than what you started with,
Yeah.
And I love boa. Boas are cool too. I got some boas I've had in my collection.
Kind of boas.
I've got
Dave's very well known in the boa game.
Well, I just enjoy boas. I'm just trying to figure out if this guy's a morpher locality guy. I'd assume locality.
Yeah. I have an original line Colombian that is pushing 12 foot. I have 2 albinos. I got a sharp line albino, and I got sharp line. I also have a lipstick sunglow albino. That's my wife.
That's
so cool. And then I would not be remiss if I did not mention, when you talk about boas, I also keep Candolia.
Oh,
so
cool.
I keep Candolia Palsoni and Candolia aspera, which to me, if you're a blood python keeper,
those are epic.
Dude, you got to go with the Candolia. So
you want to talk about something that throws you on your feet, man. Whew, those things are just like,
people, I love it when people tell me it's like, I breed and keep gray bands and they're really tough to feed. I'm like, coming into my world with Palsoni, like Candolia are an epic level challenge with feeding. So
I will say though, man, with those Viper boas, it was crazy the different colorations they were like. I saw like yellow ones and these red ones, and I was like, dude, it was, man, I was in it for a while, and then I ended up selling them to Miguel Garcia, and he took over that whole thing. But God, I will never forget how impressed those things were.
So I got to give a shout out to an OG, Vin Russo.
Yeah, shout out to Vin.
Man, I got to tell you, I got capped like F3. So if we're talking 3rd generation, captive bred, Candolia aspera, the true Viper boas from him. I got 2 girls. And I'm going to tell you, if you get that far into it, you're
in it.
I want to say that he probably just recently had an ovulation on a pairing, and I think out of everyone in the United States, I've never really seen that many people work with them, and all the litters I've ever seen were wild caughts. They came in, grab it.
Yeah, I had one. I had my dance with them, and I had a female die grab it. So I mean,
not easy. I know that.
Yeah, it's painful.
It's like 9 months. About 9 months after they ovulate or something. That's when they drop.
It's a very long gestation.
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah. The key on that one is getting them to freaking eat after they are born. So
yeah, that's. I mean, I think my buddy Miguel's even gotten a litter, but then couldn't get them to eat, and then they ended up all dying. And look, they are little tiny worms, little pissed off worms when they come out, man.
They're like swizzle sticks, man. I'm telling you, a lot of them.
All right, check this out, Rich. With your experience hatching eggs, okay, how much has temp fluctuation been something that you've noticed like a no-no when it comes to hatching eggs, or do you feel like that's natural? It does happen in the wild, so fluctuation could happen. There just has to be limits to it, and I'm just wondering what your insight on that is.
So temp fluctuation varies over the length of the development of the snake's eggs. So I tend to just normal protocols. You can incubate short tail eggs from 87 up to pushing probably 90 Fahrenheit. And that's fine. They will hatch it. They'll be fine. I've played around with for the last decade of incubating closer to the 87 mark. I've pushed the envelope a little bit lower. It extends their incubation period, but what I also found, and I don't know if I'm still trying to pinpoint whether it's parental inheritance or it's the incubation process, but generally when I incubate them on the lower end, the babies are better in personality and less nippy.
For that, yeah.
But for those that don't know, short tails, if you take really docile parents and you breed them together, the babies are docile.
Yeah.
However, that being said, you got the Jekyll and Hyde situation. If you overheat them or you piss them off, they're immediately going to go to their reputation. So,
right.
But they could also revert back. So I mean, there's never irreparable. But every so often, and I've got 2 in my collection where I'm not going to sugarcoat it. They're assholes.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you, I mean, I produce about anywhere from 80 to 120 babies a year. I'm still a hobby breeder because I got the day job. Out of 80 to 120 babies, if I get 2 or 3 that are saucy, and I'm, these are ones that might take a little extra effort to placate and get them like handleable. That's a normal year. Every so often, and I'd say once in a couple breedings, you'll get one that's just they're just a buzzsaw. And in those cases, quite honestly, I typically don't even ever list them for sale. They stay in my collection. They're basically in a retirement home, special needs home at that point. Got to have a little bit of fun. Come on.
But what if a fellow friend of yours who also keeps short tails, like and giving him a snake like that, would that be still like, nah, I'd much rather hold on to this? Like,
oh yeah, somebody sit there and say, that's care. I've had a couple people that like that. They're like, yeah, I'll take the buzzsaw. I'm like, oh, there you go.
Well, Dan doesn't like him, just so you know. And even though he's watching the Braves games right now, and the Braves hope they fucking lose. I gotta tell you, man, he doesn't like it if you send him nippy snakes.
No, and that's an important aspect to call out. Is that Dan's
is someone's phone blowing up here? What's going
on?
on?
I got it. Let me turn that thingy off, and then I got 2 questions after he's done.
Okay, yeah.
I'll keep it real quick, but I'm like, Dan's picked a good niche. He wants pet-friendly animals that are successful with people across, a broader spectrum. There's nothing wrong with that, and he's been successful. he picks really docile animals to begin with, realizing the inheritance passes through. You got friendly parents, you breed them together, the babies are friendly, and that's what works. And it doesn't always happen in all cases. So, every so often you get the one jerk, but Dan's not going to sell that. He's a smart guy.
No, but with the thing, just so I give you the insight, and this is just a ball busting. Like I love Dan, by the way. Matt O'Malley from O'Malley's MORPH.
Yeah.
So I think a couple Tinleys ago, I'm walking around, I see Dan. I go, "What's up, Dan?" I was like, I want to do this episode. I was like, "You right there, buddy? Do you want to get together?"
No, okay.
Right.
Are we done talking? By the way, I got a couple things when you're done.
Shh, no, I'm not done talking. Thanks. You just left.
When you're done. When you're done, bud. Just
fucking guy. Gotta love this guy. Anyways, walking around and I was like, Dan, I want to do this episode with you and Matt, man. I want to do this round table. And he was like, yeah, well, I'm not too happy with him right now. He sent me some snakes and they're all biters. But obviously it wasn't a big, we're all friends, get me wrong, but I always give him shit for that. And I always will give him shit for that forever. Dave, what are your
I was sweating it out when he ended up picking up a pair of Sarawak short tails from me. And Sarawaks are notorious that there's certain lines that tend to be a little nippy. And I'm like, I hope he picks the good ones.
It doesn't. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I want to jump back to incubation because I have a question. For a species that you say you keep your hotspot like 85, 86, why did you guys think that 87 or 88 was the right temperature in the incubator?
So you're talking hotspot versus incubator temperature?
Well, yeah, like if you're keeping your animal at 86 and you find that's the best thing for it, when it came to incubating the eggs, I would have thought you guys might have started a little lower with the species and maybe not have went with the general number like 88.
So I've never correlated incubation temperatures with adult housing temperatures. There's often, I found, is that parental care tends to provide more energy to the babies than they would normally be exposed to in the normal life cycle. So, when you look at conditions in Indonesia, Borneo, Thailand, native ranges for short-tailed pythons, if the habitat conditions were appropriate for the adults and it was transferable to the babies, the eggs would be just left alone. And if you look at most python species, the objective is to hurry up and get the babies head started and off on their own independently. And that's where you see maternal incubation. And if you look at maternal incubation in pythons, they tend to, especially with Southeast Asian pythons, they tend to use the muscle reflex to increase the localized temperature around the eggs. So they're actually cooking the eggs to get them to hatch quicker than if they were to do in a case where they were laid, like a colubrid, where they just lay them in a substrate surface. I think from a captive care perspective, the cooler temperatures, the more normal, but slightly above ambient temperatures, right? So we're talking, if I keep snakes at around 80 to 82 degrees and I'm incubating them 5 degrees above that at 87, it's still enough where they're incubating and developing quicker than if they were left alone. And also, I would find that the animals tend to be a little bit more placid when they hatched out. I found that if you go below 87 degrees, you get a lot of egg failure. You get a lot of deformities. And if you look at the old Ross Marzick book, used to call the Blue Bible, back in, let's say probably the late 80s, that was one of the issues that we saw with short-tail pythons. You know, it was blood pythons, Borneos, you know, or even Sumatrans. There was in those periods when they tried to breed them, there was a lot of deformities, a lot of physical aberrations, a lot of mortality in the eggs, and they were experimenting with the temperatures. You know, they weren't necessarily keeping them at the ideal conditions. And we still see that today. I mean, we still see, I mean, everybody posts on Facebook or Instagram their successes, but they don't post their failures.
I do.
Well,
Yeah, you do, buddy.
You know,
After you
like,
send them
all
to
right,
everybody.
you know, hey, you know, I just put these two animals together and I didn't get what I was expecting. You know, it's a little bit of the.
You know what's crazy with that?
reality.
Just so you know, like I honestly don't blame motherfuckers not wanting to put their failures out there, because, I mean, it's like you think you're like, okay, this is gonna make me feel better, but it doesn't. Because then you have all these fucking know-it-alls that come in and say, well, I think I know what happened. You know, I'm like, no, you don't. Just stop. Okay. I'm just letting you know this is what I'm going through. And you know, like I said, God bless anyone who wants to help, but it just makes it kind of more of a mind fuck situation, because now you're getting inputs from everywhere. And now you're like, oh my God, is it my incubator? Oh my God, is it how I'm feeding, or is it my hotspots? And all this shit comes into play.
Well, and turn the perceptions around a little bit. I mean, we're still, I mean, yeah, we've been doing this for a while, but there's still a degree of uncertainty, right? We're contributing to the body of knowledge, and successes and failures all represent an important data point in the bigger perspective, you know. And there was a period of time, I was working with an incubator that was fairly new. It was working fine. And all of a sudden I started having some crazy incubation cycles. I mean, you know, not 60, 65 days. I'm talking 90, 95 days for short-tail pythons. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I found out that I had a domino effect of issues. Not only was my thermostat taking incorrect readings, I had two sets of thermometers inside the incubator that were also incorrectly reading. And I had a fan in the incubator that had failed. So I literally had four different elements that I relied on for, I'll call it confidence, that all failed me in that case. And here I'm sitting there going, what am I doing wrong? I wasn't doing anything wrong, but I was getting misinformation. And once I figured out what was going on, I was able to recalibrate and adjust. And I found out that the reason why I was going 90 days on an incubation was because here I thought I was incubating at 88 degrees, and I was actually incubating at 83 degrees. Big difference.
Wow.
And not only that, and I'm talking about at the egg, not egg chamber, not the incubator, not the egg chamber, but the eggs themselves were at 83 degrees and not 88 degrees. And that was an important element there. The other part too is that I found out that throughout the day, the temperature wasn't constant. So I was running into a range of fluctuations. And anybody who follows me realizes I've got, I start using more scientific quality data logging to be able to monitor, regardless of what the readings are on these cheap ass $20 thermometers.
Right.
And even these nicer thermostats, the probes themselves tend to be subject to errors. So I put these data loggers in there, and it alerts me when the data starts, when the temperature ranges go outside of what I expect to be normalized. And I was finding I was all over the board. I mean, it was crazy. And that helps explain a little bit of the issues. And it's funny, we're at the point now where we could actually monitor literally by second temperatures down to the 10th of the Fahrenheit and percentages of humidity 30, 40 years ago, it was a Havabator incubator. It was basically a cooler with a heating element. That sucker was all over the board, I'm surprised we incubated anything successfully at all with those old school incubators.
Yeah.
Do you know, I didn't mean to interrupt. Do you know Star Python, Philip?
Not offhand.
It's Star Python. It's a company out of Germany. He does all carpet pythons. A friend of mine that used to work with him told me he had a program that it literally read the temperatures in the region in Australia and would replicate that in his actual setup. Barometric pressure changes. I think he had misting systems on there. I heard it was deluxe.
Oh, that's cool. Well, a little trade secret for the last 30 years, even before I was breeding successfully short tails, I always had a weather bug update from Malaysia.
Nice.
That's cool.
Well,
The problem that I learned is that it depends on where, and I was taking readings from Kuala Lumpur, and interestingly enough, none of the snakes that we get are actually from that region. So, we started realizing it would be like taking a reading from Chicago, but you were actually living in Peoria, 120 miles south, So there was wide variety, variations in it. But the key point is that, I kind of paid attention to the natural seasonality of temperatures. I mean, I keep African spurs, and I've had a male since 1995, and he's probably pushing 100 pounds. I've monitored the temperatures in the Midwest for almost 28 years because I would leave the animal outdoors, and it's interesting to see how the fluctuations on daytime highs and nighttime lows have changed over the course of almost 30 years, but we try to acclimate the animals to what they spent millions of years evolving to. We try as much as possible.
Yeah.
Well, so one conversation I've had a lot in the boa community about what you're saying now, like you said, mimicking what's going on in the wild. When you talk about, buying an animal from Matt, who's from a different barometric pressure, maybe he's 5, 6, 7 generations out of wild caught, and he's sending you an animal, same as from California, Texas, Florida, where that old literature does help. The problem is, I don't believe these animals cycle true anymore once they've been multi-generations of captive bred. And one of the reasons I say that too with boa constrictors, and again, watching your animals, I had 1 year, I had a boa litter every month of the year. I stretched out a male to multiple litters, and it was watching the body language and going by what Tracy says, food cycling for your wet and dry seasons. So again, if you having this eclectic collection and other people buying from multiple sources, do you really believe that you can get them all on one track? Or maybe when you miss 1 year, it's really because this one's cycling 6 months later.
Well, there's definitely to be said that the animals will adapt to captivity over time. And it's amazing how quickly, because you talk about a couple, not that many generations out of the wild, they acclimate. And it's one of the points that I try to impress on people. They're like, oh, I just bought an adult pair of blood pythons, so I'm going to go breed them. I'm like, good luck. Because they tend to acclimate to the environment that they're used to. And the longer they're in a certain environment, and compare that to the environment that they're in now, it's going to deviate, and, it's one thing when you buy, maybe I got a local guy who decides he's going to offload a blood python. He's in the Midwest. It's used to the seasonal change. So if I turn around and buy some animals from somebody who's kept them as adults down in Florida, it's going to be a different cycle. And it may take a couple of years before they finally kind of get used to the seasonal variations. But, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't admit I've produced blood pythons. I've actually had eggs and I've had hatchings almost every month of the year. Each of the animals, they just cycle differently. And it's really, what I found is it's often not necessarily specific to the weather conditions or the environment. Sometimes it's just as basic as a storm front that triggers the ovulation based around when they're ready. You know, I mean, you could have, especially young females, they may cycle differently than other animals that are more mature in your collection. And they may eventually like recalibrate themselves to like a normal cyclical cycle. But I found that usually when I have an out of cycle clutch, it's always a first time female.
So what do you think of this, Rich? And this is going to be a wrap up question before we get into some hot seat questions. Or Dave, unless you got one more that you could think of, I'll let you go and wrap one up. But
I don't mind wrapping, buddy. You get the pace going. We're good. I get my final thing though, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So with this female I was telling you about, Rich, that kind of like likes to favor the warm side and whatnot. I got her first clutch in 2021 in January. Sorry, 2020, right? So 2020, she lays me a very first clutch, right? I think it was like end of January. And then the year next, I don't pair her, right? And then the following year, she lays it. I get her to lay again, but then she lays in April. So is that just based off how I'm pairing and based off how I'm feeding, or was it just kind of how seasons are changing where I'm from? What would make such a big gap difference with that?
Was it a ball python?
No, chondro.
Oh, chondro.
I want to waste your time, buddy.
Yeah, no, just checking. You know, I mean, that's not that far off. I mean, it really isn't, and it could be that could be more driven by follicular development and the maturation that the female needs on the follicles to recover. So, I mean, to me, a couple months is not a big deal. You know, and green trees especially. I mean, they're the challenge isn't getting them to develop the egg follicles and develop eggs. It's just getting the eggs to incubate and certainly the babies to establish. So, amen,
brother. Amen.
Yeah. Hey, did you ever see the old reports that the initial babies in green trees in Indo were actually feeding off of cockroaches?
What?
Never heard that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, they used the gut studies were like they were finding that they were feeding on indigenous cockroaches.
I mean come on, they're gonna eat. I mean, what they gotta eat what they could eat. Like how many?
Well, and if you look at green tree pythons, the babies are often really not too far off the ground. The adults are a little bit farther up, and if you look at things like Chistrodon, like copperheads. Copperheads feed on cicadas when they emerge.
I was just talking about this yesterday because I was asking if there was any other venomous snake out there that ate insects.
Copperheads and green tree pythons are non-venomous, but there's studies that show that they will actually feed on that. So something to think about. You know, if you get a difficult feeder, see if they'll take.
What would you give them? Like a Dubai roach? What would you try to just try to attempt?
I don't know. I haven't gone that route. I'm avoiding breeding green tree pythons because I'm not sure where that's going to take me. But
so is this a dubiaroaches.com plug right now, buddy? Like, do we have a new sponsor every day?
Hey, I used to do Blabberus discoidalis, the discoids, the false heads, and for bearded dragons. And I'm going to tell you, it seemed like everything ate them suckers. So yeah, who knows?
All right, Dave, let's go. Wrap it up.
Go for it.
Hey, I got a what, when, where. First commercial reptile you bought to keep.
Oh man, first commercial ball python, 1990.
Where is that tattooed on your body?
Oh, ball python, not tattooed. I got dragons and I got a viper on my shoulder.
Don't be ashamed of it, buddy. I got one right here on my heart.
I got old school, man. You know.
Is that it, Dave?
Yeah, that was 2 questions. That was
That was 2.
4 questions ish.
Rich, you there?
Yeah.
Okay,
What?
I thought it was me frozen. Listen, these 2 hours went by super quick. I do got to hit you with the hot seat questions though before you take off. It's only right. All right. The only time I would never do a hot seat question if the show was that bad, but this show was far from bad. So, guys, if you haven't already, by the way, the likes are very respectable. But if you've not hit the like yet, I want to get the likes up for Rich because we're gonna get the hot seat questions up and cracking. All right, Rich, you know how this goes, man. Quicker the better. Are you ready for this?
Go for it. I'll try.
Okay, here we go. Coming in hot. 8 cut or no cut?
No cut.
Oh man, is it me freezing? Do it again. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. 8 cut or no cut?
No cut.
Wow, respect. Favorite arboreal species of snake?
Arboreal?
Yeah.
Ooh. Green tree python.
Pre-first shed meal or post-first shed meal?
Oh man, I keep short tails. It's always pre-first shed.
Yay imports or boo imports?
Oh, yay imports if you know what you're dealing with.
What if you had to make them legal or not? What would you do? If it was up to you to allow them, what would you say?
Got to qualify, man. Imports, wild caught versus captive bred. I would say if they're wild collected, they need to go to the right people, not to the general community. If they're imported captive bred, they're well, we could qualify whether they're as good as what we have here.
Go bioactive or don't go bioactive?
Bioactive for small species of herps is awesome, but you got to know what you're doing.
Yay sports or boo sports?
I'm not really a sports guy.
Hey, you got a shitty sports town, buddy. I don't blame you.
Yeah, can't argue there.
Steak or fish?
Oh, steak.
Favorite cut of steak?
Oh, filet or ribeye. It's kind of a toss-up.
Favorite metal band?
Right now, Slipknot.
Respect. What's one metal band that isn't really a metal band but tries to claim to be a metal band?
Oh shit. Van Halen.
Oh wow.
I was gonna say Stone Sour.
Nickelback.
Yeah.
Canada doesn't count, buddy.
Oh my god. Little word association. First thing to come to mind. Morph market.
Market channel.
Number 1 sell strategy.
Ooh, be honest.
Milk.
Whole.
Substrate.
Ooh, paper.
Stuck shed.
Ooh, soak.
FedEx shipping.
Necessary evil.
Facebook groups.
Ooh, unnecessary evil.
Okay, how about this? If it came down to you eliminating either short tails or blood pythons, which one would you eliminate?
Oh man. Well, short tails is too broad because you got too many species in there. Wow. You know, if I had to go to variety and appeal, I would keep my bloods.
Wow. Well, there you have it. Wow. Amazing episode.
That's a tough one, man.
I know it has to be tough, man. But I got to say, this has been an amazing 2 hours. One of many rounds, I got to say, that you'll be a part of this podcast because we could have went an easy another 2 hours. But I got to say, man, we had just shy of 70 people tapped in at one point, Rich. What do you have to say to all your supporters out there, longtime supporters? I mean, I got to tell you, since I started this podcast, people have been telling me to bring you on this show. So obviously you have a lot of people out there rooting for you. What do you have to say to everyone out there?
Well, I'm glad to see people like following me. I think hopefully because I'm honest and true.
Respect.
But I mean, let's face it. I mean, you know, I fight for the underdog. The short tails are not a popular like you see with other species, and I think or at least I hope that other people will find their passion. That doesn't necessarily mean commercial interest, and stick with it, because it's the only way we're going to maintain diversity in our community of reptile interests, so
Right.
Yeah.
And I've heard nothing but great things of people. You've mentored so many people who are very passionate to be a part of the blood python short tail game. But if anyone out there just wants to reach out to you, would you say like Instagram's the best way, or what's the kind of best way for anyone just to maybe reach out for maybe even for one of your productions?
Man, I'm pretty. I try to be pretty approachable on all the. So Facebook, Rich Crowley Reptiles, Instagram, Rich Crowley Reptiles. You can email me, pagona31@yahoo.com.
What about your website? Is your website good too?
My website, richcrowleyreptiles.com,
Cool.
So, I'm all about information exchange. So,
Sweet.
People aren't buying from me, but as long as they're inquiring from me, I'll load them up with what they need to know.
Awesome. Well, listen, thank you so much. I appreciate it. So, anyone out there, please go give Rich a follow right now. And that's a wrap for Rich Crowley Reptiles, ladies and gentlemen. Give it up. All right, you're all set, Rich. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Take care, everybody.
Please. David, thank you so much. I appreciate you stepping in this episode and being so player. Honestly, I think this was a pretty good podcast. What do you think tonight?
I think that 2 hours went by very fast, buddy, and we had to do minimal work.
Yes, I agree, man. There's a shit ton of information put out based off just his answers going for a long time. And I think I love, that's that kind of like Forrest Cody type energy, or even you, man. Even you got if someone asks you a question like that and you got an answer, you don't stop either sometimes. So
yeah.
I love it. Your background, by the way, is tilted, but it's okay.
Oh, that's my phone, buddy. This duct tape's only so good, buddy. I'll throw some new one on there next week. How about that?
No, man. Listen, I know you have a early morning tomorrow. You're taking off to Oklahoma. You're gonna go do some paddle fishing, right?
Yep, gonna meet up with Jeff Byers in the morning for paddle fishing. Set up for the show in Oklahoma City, and do some road cruising tomorrow night.
All right. Well, listen, I'm gonna let you go, Dave. I appreciate you so much, guys. Custom Scales on Instagram and obviously on Facebook. Hit them up. But thank you so much. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll talk to you tomorrow, Dave. Have a good night.
You too, bud.
See ya. All right, guys. Episode 348 in the books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, Trap Talk God 619. Follow the podcast's Instagram page as well, Trap Talk Reptile Podcast. If you're on Facebook, what is good? Don't forget to follow and like my Facebook page, guys. Can we please get Trap Talk Reptile Podcast on Facebook cracking? I mean, I appreciate all the love so far, but let's get that shit cracking. Speaking of cracking, man, if you want to tap in more than what you see here, if you want to meet the trappers, if you want to kind of become more official into the reptile industry, go down to the link below, the very first link in the description below. Click on it. Join the Trap Talk Patreon family. As soon as you join the Patreon family, you get a link to the Discord, and there you'll join 165 plus people who are all about keeping reptiles, breeding. I mean, shit, you name it, man. Pick your poison. It is amazing. It's nonstop popping. And I love my trappers so much. I appreciate it. Also, don't forget that tonight's episode is brought to you by Sim Container. If you got eggs, put them inside of a sim box. Less steps, less stress. If it's a sim, it's a win all day, every day. Also, don't forget that this episode is brought to you by Clutch. Keep your organization to the professional level when it comes to your ball pythons. I'm telling you right now, competition's thick. So if you're organized, put you ahead of the game, I feel like, personally. Guys, drop a comment. Let me know what you liked best about tonight. Appreciate all the super chats. Super chats are very welcomed. I love you guys for all the love and support. You guys, seriously, just by watching this is mad support to me, and you guys go far and beyond. So episode 348, I'll catch you Sunday. Episode 349, my homegirl Renee finally coming to the Trap Talk Roundtable. It's going to be an epic episode. See you guys Sunday. Have a good night, and I'm out. Cheers.